Okay, hi everyone. I just wanted to touch base. This is our first Zoom scheduled for the week. I don't have any participants in the room right now, but I'm going to go through some slides that I've used when I've taught this class previously, and they're just really high level, kind of setting the stage for why we do media theory, why we study media theory, what we can hope to get from it, and hopefully give you some thoughts and direction for the work ahead of us. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. And hopefully this is going to work the way I intend it to. So I'm going to do this. Here we go. Awesome. Okay, so week one, we're just doing a really high level view of mass communication, introduction to theories, kind of what is theory. So let's dive in. Well, first, it's week one, so let's just cover the to-dos in case you're worried. I know a few of you don't have all the materials, so I just urge you to get those as soon as you can. You are going to need them, but you can, no matter what, get started on the media log. So that's logging for 3 days, what media you use, how often, timestamp it, make note if you're doing multiple media at the same time. So if you're on your cell phone and watching TV, or if you're on your laptop and watching TV, or if you're on your phone, laptop, and TV all at the same time, make note of that. And then write a reflection up to 500 words on what you noticed about your habits. So you've got readings, you've got a couple of chapters in how to do media and cultural studies, and you've got some work in media and society. So make sure to do those and then participate in our 2 discussion boards. And a reminder that the first submission is due Wednesdays at the end of the day. That's Mountain, right now it's daylight time, so Mountain Daylight Time, 11:59 p.m. I'll generally stay out of those until everyone has their first comments in, and then I'll jump into the discussion as you all have until the end of Sunday to finish your responses to 2 classmates. So I am looking for 1 original post that should be a little longer, and then two additional posts. Comment, interact with your classmates, ask questions, be curious. I want everyone to go deeper than, hey, nice post. I really want you to engage with the material and add something. So this should be sort of a building conversation. I always want to mention this. I'm going to move my little video down here for y'all. So we're going to come across the word media a lot. And I want to be really specific in media studies, how we use the term and what it means. So I'm going to let that slide be up there a little bit and also show you that I know, and I have noticed that in this book, they tend to say the media. However, they have a way of doing it that sort of works. I wish I had pulled out an example before I started this, but I want to emphasize that there are many mediums, or there are many media, and medium is actually our singular word. So print is one medium. Television is a medium. Facebook is one medium, and it's different than Twitter, which is a different medium. And all together, these are media. These are the media tools. These are media channels. And I want to be really specific when you're writing that you're making note of the fact that media is a plural word. So media are, not media is. So it's not singular. All media are not the same. And particularly, I'll hear a lot of times in this class, the media do this, or the media are, ruining politics. Well, it's not the media, because there isn't one. There are many, many, many media organizations, and that's media as an adjective. There are many types of media, and there are many human beings making choices about what is shared through these media, So that sounds like a lot. I can go on and on about that for quite a while. I want you to just sit with that, think about it. If you have questions, please ask me. I will comment if I see writings that say the media is. So even if you just start by making sure that you're saying media are, it will change how you write the rest of that sentence. And you will have to realize it. You have to think about how you actually are thinking about what media are and what our sort of like media environment is. So I'm a little bit of a language geek. I love learning languages. So we can talk about the differences between using the word as a noun or adjective if necessary. So moving on, how to approach the readings. These books are pretty accessible. They're new to, we changed up the curriculum from the last time I taught it. So it's a whole new curriculum this fall quarter. So I think most of this still applies. I find the readings a bit more accessible than some of what we used before. But still, some of this is really new to some of you. Some of it's your first class. Some of you are near the end. So just don't get bogged down with every word, but really look for themes and ideas. It's really helpful to preview your chapter before you read it. So read the heading, read the subtitles, read the intro, read the conclusion, anything in pull-out boxes like that, bullet points. This is what you're doing in this chapter, and that will help you to sort of organize even the way in which you read and what you pay attention to. So use all of that amazing formatting to help also focus your reading and learning. As we read about theory and different theories, it's really important to start considering worldview, point of view, and ideological and philosophical underpinnings. So everyone who's writing about theory comes from a specific place and experience in the world, and that comes through in their writing. So it doesn't mean that all theories are complementary. Like, there are going to be things that conflict with each other. There are theories that are developed in the 21st century that contradict something that was developed in the 20th century, and that's all okay. It's the evolution of knowledge, which is a lot of what we're looking at. Unfamiliar words, look them up. If you don't know them, probably lots of people are unfamiliar. So just always, check those things out. Make time to think. I think I mentioned this in my introduction, but a lot of this course, it is important to just spend some time thinking, because you might not just like snap get it. So take time to reflect and sort of ponder and take in the world around you, and ask even people around you what they think about something. Sometimes, it might not just be in a discussion board, but it could be a friend at home or having coffee with someone that, because media are such a part of our society, they are everywhere in our world, other people will have direct experience and may have some things to share about that. So, and in your reflections, you can always be willing to talk about what resonates with you or what doesn't resonate with you. So any of that is good. So why media theory? Theory is helping us understand the world. So it's trying to tell us something about ourselves and our world and how we interact with the world, how media influence us, how we influence media. So we talk about systems and agency throughout this first week. So it's not a one-way thing. It's not that humans have all the control. There are structures, and there are institutional structures, business structures that influence decisions, and corporations that impact media that's created, and how that in the end gets to us. And then our social experience impacts how we interact with it or don't. And maybe if something's not ringing true with us, we don't interact with it, or we don't respond to it, we don't engage with it. And that's feedback for media institutions. Always look for golden nuggets. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, just there's so much to learn. But I love this concept of look for the nuggets that really speak to you. Those like aha moments when you're reading, like that makes so much sense. And that helps you start connecting with your interests or just new thoughts, new knowledge for yourself, and can be a really rich place for your reflections and discussions. And this work really helps us just be really thoughtful about the world that we're in, and less sort of just an actor moving through it, but being a participant in the world and participant in media. So you are participating, but it's heightens the awareness of how we interact with institutions and society, and the connection that media make connections between all sorts of societal institutions and individuals. Oh, we're going to bring Homer back. So challenges in media theory. If you look throughout the history of media theory, sometimes applying the traditional scientific method is really difficult. And there are theorists who did this. This was sort of early, like late 19th century, early 20th century, where it was like the rise of the scientific method and the hard sciences, like the natural sciences as opposed to social sciences. So in an earlier era, sort of qualitative research was actually really highly respected because the scientific method hadn't been fully developed with surveys and data and N values and statistics. So this is actually a more modern approach to research, and it doesn't always apply to media really well. It can be difficult to get large sample sizes. So there are other ways of studying media. So we'll look at some of those. Causality is not easily proven, so it's really difficult to say someone saw this commercial and they did this, because we interact with so many instances of advertisements, media, our society, who we live with influences what we want to buy and do. So it's really difficult to study direct connections between media and individuals. It's also really difficult to measure human behavior because we're complex. We have a lot of emotions. We could be making a buying decision based on how we're feeling that day. We could be posting something or writing about something also because we had a really great day or because we had not such a great day. And those things change. They're not consistent. So it's also a level of complexity that is added to media studies in particular. The effect of testing and exposure on human behavior is really slow, so it's difficult to do longitudinal surveys because the impact isn't quick. It's not like, okay, if you poke someone 10 times, you see some changes in the body, or you give someone a certain medical procedure or pill and you see pretty quickly what the result is. Humans can be exposed to experiences, thoughts, and ideas, and they could change their ideas really quickly, they could change really slowly, and they could never change. And also humans have this underlying, like, that this is our agency, right? What we think, how we feel, what our goals are, we can think about ourselves thinking. That's the self-reflexivity. So it makes this sort of research and theory development challenging or really rich in a way that gives us opportunities beyond the scientific method. So just imagine, we're inundated with news, social media, screens are everywhere, and we're living in an age where, I mean, truly, it's a media saturated age, and in that regard, this high tech sort of screen digital media age that is different than, say, hundreds of years ago, prior to the radio even. So there's a chart in the Media and Society book that looks at sort of the history of media. I'm going to see what page it's on. Talks about radio use. It lists radio as the first type of media. And the reality is that we had media before that. We had, flyers and newsprint, and we had town criers. So just human beings were part of the original media environment because those communications were not direct communication. So if I was a town crier and I went out to the square to announce to 100 people the news, that's like your original, nightly newscaster. And that is mediated because the individual with the megaphone or the loud voice is sharing their understanding of the news, their knowledge through their voice. And that becomes sort of communal knowledge. So it's not that media or mediated communication is new. It's just that we continue to develop new forms of it, new delivery mechanisms, new platforms, new technologies. Okay, a little bit about just defining theory, because I don't think these texts really discuss it, and this is from a previous textbook, theories are stories about how and why events occur. So we begin with this assumption about the universe, including the social universe, and we are looking at how that's created by acting human beings and what it reveals, certain basic and fundamental properties and processes that explain the ebb and flow of events in specific processes. So theory is like, I have a hunch, so I'm theorizing that this is why X is happening, and I'm going to observe and see if I can collect data that supports that. And so generally, once a theory becomes codified, it is something that has been proven, not through always a survey, but something that's been reported, reflected on, written about, considered, observed enough times, and it's been vetted by the social scientific community as holding value, because it helps us to explain something that we see occurring. That doesn't mean it's irrefutable. It just, theories can help us understand something the way it is today, and a new theory could be developed tomorrow or the week after that enriches our understanding. So it's theory isn't a theory, is a concept, but it doesn't mean that we stagnate and stop. It just, there's a fluidity of like always understanding, learning, defining what is happening, what's developing. So it's not, this is from the Baran and Davis textbook. Miller says this, but theory is not objective. And that's kind of what I was trying to say. Different schools of thought will define theory in different ways, depending on the needs of the theories and on beliefs about the social world and the nature of knowledge. So how I even attempt to theorize is also based on my personal worldview. So that's part of the agency that I bring to this knowledge process. So situating theory in time and place. And this is what I've been talking about, like as it changes over time. So theory is contextual, it's situated in a historical moment, and it's imbued with meaning based on human need and experience in that era. So when you're studying a theory, it's really important to understand what place in history was that? What country was it? So a lot of what we're studying is very sort of in the tradition of like the Western world, so European and US based theories, and that's a really specific worldview. I mean, it's not homogenous across, but there are similarities just based on immigration and how the US came to be founded, that these bodies of knowledge don't encompass all ways of knowing or all experiences. So we're going to be studying lots of theories, and it's just always important to be thinking about how did these come to be in the world. And, you can ask a lot of questions. Who wrote it? Where did they live? How old were they? What was happening in politics? What was happening in social movements? Was it a man? Was it a woman? Were there any marginalized identities around gender, sexuality, race, religion? All of these things impact the way in which someone views the world and experiences the world. So first, I'm going to look at 4 categories of media theory. These are not listed in Media and Society. This slide is not in here, this content. It's on the next slide. I'm going to use the words that Media and Society, Croteau and Hoynes use. But I want to just give you some other words to discuss theory, because you may have heard these in other classes or you may hear them again in the future, but we haven't encountered them yet. So post-positivist theory is this empirical observation guided by scientific method. So Lazarsfeld is mentioned in these chapters. He is sort of the founder or the originator of post-positivist theory in media studies, and really used surveys, data and studies to try to understand and theorize about how knowledge was passed along and how that influenced elections, actually. Hermeneutic theory is the study of understanding, especially by interpreting action and text. So this looks as like anything can be a text, a performance is a text, a book has text, music is a text, a street performance is a text, and you can interpret these activities so they can be written, performed, heard as the text. Critical theory really challenges the dominant social order. So we're including cultural and political economy theories, and usually we'll spend more time. I think this class will get into this earlier and spend more time on it. But critical theory looks at the fact that there is a dominant order, that there are players politically, socially, that have more power, that influence our society and our mediated society and media, that they have more influence, and that often that means that power is subjugating people with less power from marginalized communities. So critical theory really looks to flip that and examine it and question the dominant social order. And this critical theory is what has developed in like the latter half of the 20th century. And it's in a response to sort of the stickiness and the muddleness of human nature, where it's very contextual and it's not easily put in boxes or in surveys. And a normative theory is coming from this place that a media system or our media systems should operate in order to conform to or realize a set of ideal social values. So this is a very highly idealized type of theory that looks for not a utopia, but an idealized state, and then really examines what needs to happen to have a media system that supports this, like a specific sociocultural context, and sort of it holds everything in comparison to that ideal. All right, so in Courteau and Hoynes, they talk about 4 ways of knowing. So these are not exactly parallel to the types of theory on the previous page, but there are some connections. So oral history is, when I read this the first time in this book, I was thinking about, if you've read the book, The Giver, and how there was a specific person who was tasked with memorizing all of history. And that role was so guarded and precious, and also really taxing, but that history wasn't written down and it was only passed on by people sharing it. And that the act of storytelling actually helped keep the story and history alive and enriched it, so that if one person forgot a detail, someone else had that detail. Classical way of knowing, so the history of rhetoric, logic, the logic of argument and reason, that it's structured, that things have to flow out of each other. And this comes to exist in the Greek agora, which is today the Greek marketplace, but was this central cultural space of knowledge sharing. It was like, if we're going to have democracy, we have to have a place where we can discuss our social issues, and things ought to be logical. Like, you can't just say whatever, but you have to have a logical reason behind your argument. So that is one way of knowing, is building a logical argument. The modern way of knowing is this positivism, or the scientific method. So being certain that if we can test it and replicate it, and someone else can replicate exactly what we did, then that the knowledge that's created is sort of meaningful and powerful, that is a way of creating knowledge. And then finally, we get to cultural studies, which really examines the intricacies of culture, power, language, dynamics, social context, historical context, gender context, the hegemony of languages or people in power, and then looks at what is below the surface, because there is knowledge that doesn't rise to the surface because power suppresses it. So counter narratives, the narratives of the oppressed, are things that don't always make it, or they generally don't make it to the same level as messages from a dominant population, because there's an interest in subverting them, or not subverting, in suppressing them. So cultural studies looks to subvert and bring to light other narratives and other ways of knowing. So a few distinguishing factors about theory and just sort of knowledge is, a couple words that are good to know. Ontology means the nature of reality. So what is knowledge? So kind of like what is the data of knowledge is one way of explaining ontology, like what constitutes, what's the material of knowledge. Um, epistemology is how is knowledge created and expanded. So you see that in the ways of knowing and the types of theory, that how people develop theories and the methods they use. So we're going to talk about that more in this book, is how we develop knowledge and how we do research. That builds our epistemology. And then axiology is the proper role of values in research and theory building. So how do we use values? What is the role of values in our research? And across the bottom, you've got this, there's sort of a spectrum from scientists, with the humanists being in a different place, about sort of scientists being maybe more in traditionally a quantitative area and humanists being what we consider more of a qualitative type of research. So, surveys, big data sets, replicable experiments versus rich understanding of culture, interviews, using first-person narrative, and what we'll get into later is a bit of ethnography, one of our projects later in the quarter. So we'll be in the qualitative realm for a lot of our research. This is just an image about, I'm going to try to move this down here, about knowledge through the ages. I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but I can share out the slides later. But just to think about the ways in which knowledge has been shared over time. So we see the radio is kind of coming out more than halfway through this evolution. And it's just to make us think about what are the ways in which communication has been mediated for millennia, really, for thousands of years. Because I think the first on this, cave paintings, 30,000 BC, and those were cave paintings. So even if you think of hieroglyphics as an early form of mediated communication. So I hope you have a good sense of what is happening in this class. I'm going to try to move back to my window. And I hope that if you have any questions, you'll contact me and we'll discuss more.